The sharp staccato click of Veronica's heels on the marble floor was the only warning Sarah had before her world shattered. Late again. The F train had stalled in the tunnel, a mechanical sigh followed by suffocating stillness. The air in the car, already thick with the morning's recycled breath, had grown progressively hotter, a damp, cloying blanket of humanity. Now, having burst from the station and power-walked 6 blocks, she was moving through the cavernous, refrigerated lobby of Apex Innovations Group. The sudden chill was a shock, raising goosebumps on her arms beneath her coat. The air here was heavy with its own calculated scents. The dark, bitter aroma of fresh pulled espresso from the artisan coffee bar warred with a cloying, lily-based fragrance misting from unseen vents. Cold. Everything here was designed to intimidate and impress, from the 30-foot waterfall cascading over a wall of polished black granite, its roar a constant, managed thunder, to the silent army of associates. They glided past in perfectly tailored suits of charcoal gray and obsidian navy, their faces impassive, their movements economical, their gazes fixed forward. They were sharks in a corporate sea, and she was a minnow who had missed the tide. Sarah, a small island of cream-colored wool in this ocean of corporate darkness, clutched the single-file folder to her chest as if it were a shield. Her other hand, a subconscious, constant gesture, rested on the slight, firm curve of her belly, a gesture of protection. A constant, grounding reminder of the secret motivation that pushed her through 16-hour days and sleepless nights as an unpaid intern. The baby, her hope, was all that mattered. The memory surfaced. Chin up, she told herself, her own internal mantra against the building dread. You can still salvage this. Slip in unnoticed. Hand the completed acquisitions report directly to Mr. Thorne's executive assistant, a quiet victory. It was a good plan. It lasted 10 seconds. Miss Williams! The voice sliced through the lobby's low hum, as sharp and cold as shattered glass. Marcus Thorne stood before her, a monolith in a custom-tailored dark suit that seemed to absorb the light, making him appear darker, denser than any other object in the room. He was a man carved from ambition and impatience, his features honed to a cutting edge, and he was not smiling. At his side, a splash of defiant crimson in the monochrome expanse, was Veronica Stone. Her red dress was a wound, a deliberate statement. The chunky gold chains around her neck chimed softly as she shifted her weight, a predator's idle jingle before the pounce. A smirk played on her perfectly painted red lips. The ambient hum of conversation around them didn't just die. It was vacuumed from the space. People slowed their determined walks, their trajectories altering as they created a wide, respectful berth. Heads turned. The quiet clicks of keyboards from the visitors' area ceased. Sarah felt the sudden, prickling heat of 100 pairs of eyes on her, a physical weight pressing down. "Mr. Thorne," Sarah began, her voice impressively steady, a small miracle of willpower. "My sincere apologies. The F train was?" "The F train." Marcus tasted the words as if they were poison, rolling them around his mouth before spitting them out. "Ah, yes, the great equalizer, the metal serpent that winds its way through the burrow of excuses." He took a slow, deliberate step closer. "It is a fascinating study in mediocrity, is it not? The great masses, packed together, smelling of desperation and day-old coffee, content to be delayed, content to be late, content to arrive defeated before the day has even begun. But we are not the great masses, are we, Miss Williams?" He was so close now, She could smell the expensive, sharp scent of his cologne, cedarwood, bergamot, and a cold, metallic note of pure disdain. His gaze flickered, a micro-expression of contempt, down to the hand on her belly, then back to her eyes. The corner of his mouth tightened into a bloodless line. "Evidently, it is not." "This wasn't about contentment, Mr. Thorne. It was a mechanical failure," Sarah clarified, her voice quiet but firm. "But I have the report you wanted." She extended the folder, a peace offering. Her arm was a straight, unwavering line. "The projections are double-checked. All sources are cited. I stayed until 3 a.m. to finish it." Marcus ignored the folder as if it were an irrelevance. "A report. You offer a report," he scoffed, his voice rising slightly. "I offer an opportunity, a chance to breathe the rarefied air of corporate strategy, to witness firsthand how empires are built and futures are forged. I offer a seat, however temporary, at the table of the gods, and you, in return, offer a report. A report that, I can only assume, was completed between bouts of tardiness." Veronica let out a low, throaty chuckle, a sound like gravel rolling in cream. "Maybe her alarm clock is on Union time, Marcus." The gold chains clattered as she reached up to straighten his already perfect tie, a gesture of public ownership. Her scarlet nails were daggers against the dark silk. Or maybe she just doesn't have the stamina for the big leagues. From across the lobby, sitting in the low, slung leather chairs of the visitors area, but with an analyst's laptop open, David Chen looked up. He adjusted his thin-framed glasses. He saw the tableau, the dark suit, the red dress, the cream coat. He saw the rigid set of Sarah's jaw, the subtle tremor in the hand she held out. He saw her other hand, white-knuckled, pressed against her stomach. A cold knot of anger tightened in his own gut. His thumb, hidden below the lip of the low table, swiped across his phone screen. The small red circle appeared. "Recording." "My performance has been exemplary," Sarah stated, not a plea, a fact. "My reviews are perfect. I've taken on 3 projects beyond the scope of my internship, and every single one was completed ahead of schedule." "Perfect," Marcus's voice boomed, a theatrical display for his captive audience. He was a preacher, and this lobby was his pulpit. "Perfection is not a static grade on a piece of paper. It is a dynamic, relentless daily pursuit. It is arriving before the sun to claim the day. It is staying until the city lights have surrendered the skyline to the moon. It is sacrificing comfort for achievement, personal matters for professional triumph." He gestured expansively, his hand slicing the air. "It is a fire, a hunger. It is the engine that drives Apex to crush its competition." He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of his pronouncement settle on her shoulders. He wanted her to break. He wanted to see her crumble. "I look at you, and I do not see that fire," he continued, his voice dropping slightly. "I see compromise. I see distraction. I see someone who believes that the rules of gravity, the rules of time, the rules of Apex do not apply to her. You were late Monday. You were 40 minutes late last Wednesday. Today it is nearly 10 a.m. This is not an internship, Miss Williams. This is a multi-billion-dollar enterprise where every single second, every single employee is a cog in a vast, world-changing machine. A cog that is late," he leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper, "grinds the entire apparatus to a halt." "It won't happen again," she said, her chin held high. Her voice was a shard of defiance in the crushing silence. "No," Marcus said, his voice dropping even further, a conspiratorial whisper that somehow carried across the polished marble. "It will not." He finally took the folder from her hand, his fingers brushing hers with a dismissive coldness. He did not open it. Because the Apex culture is one of accountability. It is my solemn duty as a leader to prune the branches that do not bear fruit, to make examples of those who threaten our ecosystem of excellence. You have become a threat, Miss Williams, a slow, perpetually late, walking, talking threat to everything we are building here. He turned, a performer playing to the crowd, addressing the assembled silent employees. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Apex does not tolerate weakness. Apex does not reward excuses. Apex does not subsidize mediocrity. He pivoted back to Sarah. The final, damning pronouncement hung in the air. Your internship is terminated, effective immediately. He didn't hand the folder back. He simply opened his fingers and dropped it. The pages filled with her diligent, all-night work, her hope, her future, fluttered and scattered across the pristine floor, a paper storm of failure at his feet. Veronica's sharp, cruel bark of laughter was the only sound, echoing in the sudden, vast silence. Marcus turned, his arm wrapping around her waist, and they walked toward the gleaming bank of executive elevators, a king and his consort leaving the arena, the crowd parting before them. Sarah stood frozen, the cold of the marble floor seeping up through the soles of her shoes. The whispers began, a corrosive, sibilant tide rising around her. She could feel the sting of their pity, the cold satisfaction of her rivals, the stark fear in others. She bent down slowly, the movement awkward as she tried not to compress her middle, to retrieve the scattered pages of her work. Her hand rested on her belly, a desperate, futile attempt to shield her daughter from the humiliation. Each sheet of paper felt slick and cold against her trembling fingers. Gathering her shredded dignity and the worthless report, she walked not toward the exit, but toward the frosted glass doors that led to the intern bullpen to gather her coat and personal effects. She raised her keycard to the sensor. It flashed red, a flat, electronic beep of denial, already deactivated. The machine was nothing if not efficient. She was an outsider now, locked out, with nothing left to do but turn around and walk back through the lobby, past the waterfall and the silent, judging eyes, and out into a world that had just become terrifyingly uncertain. Fear's metallic tang coated her mouth, a bitter herald of her world crumbling. The marble floor, once promising, now felt like glacial tundra. Each step echoed. Hollow clicks amplified the lobby's vast, indifferent silence. She moved, a fragile ghost, her cream coat offering no warmth. Judgment seeped. This walk was a gauntlet, a public unraveling. Unbearable weight buckled her. Whispers pricked her skin. Failure, disgrace. Air felt thick, suffocating. Then came the sudden, brutal blast of cold, recycled air hitting her face as she pushed with desperate force through the heavy glass of the revolving door. It wasn't the fresh, bracing air of the city, but a sudden, violent displacement, a physical shock that stole her breath. Yet, in that moment of disorienting chill, it was precisely the push she needed. She stumbled. Not outside onto the bustling, indifferent Manhattan street where taxis honked their impatience and the incessant rumble of traffic formed a distant, familiar symphony, but rather into an ancillary corridor. This forgotten artery of the building, less grand and far more utilitarian than the gleaming lobby she'd just escaped, offered a stark, immediate contrast. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed with a low, unblinking intensity, casting a stark, shadowless glow on the muted beige walls. The air here was noticeably thinner, carrying a faint, clinical scent of sterile cleaning solution, mixed with the ghost of old, forgotten coffee, a bitter echo of countless hurried mornings. A distinct, biting chill settled upon her exposed skin, raising goosebumps along her arms, a cold more invasive than the subtle frost of the lobby. She found herself in a high-end executive restroom, a space designed for discretion, not comfort. 3 stalls crafted from dark, polished wood gleamed under discreet lighting. The sinks and taps were of burnished chrome, reflecting the cool light in sharp, unforgiving glints. The room was utterly empty, a desolate sanctuary. She instinctively gravitated towards the farthest stall, seeking the deepest corner, the furthest remove. Her hands, despite her efforts to control them, trembled visibly as she reached for the lock, her fingers fumbling with the cool, smooth metal. The sharp, decisive click of the latch snapping into place was deafening in the sudden, profound quiet of the small space, echoing off the pristine tiles like a gunshot. It was the sound of a barrier, however flimsy, between her and the judging world outside. Knees gave way. She sank, composure shattering, a delicate, splintered figurine. Vision blurred. Tears burned hot and thick, stinging her eyes. Heat and ice mingled. Ringing sharpened in her ears a metallic whine. Cacophony of despair. Unforgiving porcelain offered blunt comfort. Her world felt terrifyingly unstable. Shaking, she pressed her belly. Hope, a whisper. Shame for her child. Raw. Lily's mock despair. Her anchor. A soft, hesitant knock. A pause, stretched taut and agonizing. Then, another gentle tap. A quiet insistence that splintered the fragile quiet she had built around herself. Sarah froze, every muscle in her body locking rigid. She held her breath, the high-pitched ringing in her ears sharpening to a painful, piercing point, every nerve ending screaming in protest. Who knew she was here? Had they followed her? A sliver of white appeared under the stall door, thin and stark against the dark wood. It slid deeper, a silent invasion of her private misery, then stopped. A heartbeat later, the soft scrape of footsteps receded, fading into the corridor's quiet hum. The silence that followed felt heavier, pregnant with unspoken meaning. She waited. A full minute crawled past, each second an eternity, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Then another, equally interminable minute followed. The silence stretched, vast and empty, filling the space with its oppressive weight, amplifying the frantic beat of her own pulse. Was it a trick? A cruel joke? Finally, slowly, cautiously, she unlatched the door. The click, this time a barely audible sigh of capitulation. David Chen stood a few feet away, his back to her, silhouetted against the large, frosted window that offered a blurred, impressionistic view of the city skyline. He wasn't looking at her, wasn't invading her space with his gaze. He simply stood, a silent, comforting presence. As she fully emerged, his broad shoulders subtly shifted, and he turned, his movement deliberate and unhurried. His gaze, when it met hers, was soft, gentle, devoid of the pity or judgment she had braced herself for. Instead, it held an almost preternatural understanding, a quiet recognition of her pain that bypassed words entirely. He held out a pristine, perfectly folded white handkerchief, its crisp linen, a stark contrast to the crumpled state of her own being. Sarah hesitated, her gaze flicking from his calm eyes to the offered square of white fabric. The simple gesture, so understated, so unexpected, felt like a lifeline. She reached out, her fingers still unsteady, and took it. His fingers brushed hers for the briefest moment. They were surprisingly warm, a stark contrast to the icy chill that had gripped her. He offered a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement of her acceptance, of her pain, of everything. He didn't speak a single word, didn't utter a platitude or ask a question. He simply turned back to the frosted window, his back once again, a solid, unmoving wall, providing a quiet moment of sanctuary, a silent agreement to let her recompose herself without the pressure of conversation. The air between them, once taut with unspoken fear and humiliation, now settled into a fragile, empathetic peace. She pressed the soft cotton of the handkerchief against her eyes, feeling its cool, soothing texture against her inflamed skin. The tears, though no longer flowing, had left her eyes raw and tender. The high-pitched ringing in her ears, which had been a tormenting constant, slowly began to recede, fading like a distant echo until it was replaced by the low, distant hum of the building's unseen machinery, a return to the external world. Her breath, which had been shallow and ragged, started to steady, deepening into more rhythmic, life-affirming inhalations. She glanced down at the object still clutched in her hand. It wasn't just the handkerchief. Beneath it, she felt the smooth, stiff edge of a card, a plain white business card. His name, printed in a simple, elegant font, David Chen. Below that, his title, Junior Data Analyst, and a phone number, nothing more. No explanation for his presence, no intrusive questions about her distress. Just a quiet, profound act of kindness, an offer of support without strings or demands. The simplicity of it struck her with an unexpected force, a small beacon in the overwhelming darkness. Tears gone, a raw ache, betrayal and fear throbbed in her chest. Yet, beneath the lingering pain, something else was hardening inside her. A fragile but undeniable resolve began to crystallize, a core of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She would not beg, not for Marcus Thorne, that arrogant, self-serving architect of her downfall. Not for Apex, the corporate giant that had so casually, so coldly dismissed her. She would not cry in public again, would not offer them the satisfaction of her visible heartbreak. This grief, this agonizing shame, this battle for her future and her child's was private. It was hers alone. This was just the beginning, and she would meet it with a newfound, fierce determination. The world outside awaited, ready for whatever fight she had left in her. Across town, hours later, the stark reality of Sarah's ruin was a cause for perverse celebration. High above the indifferent city, in an office reeking of power and self-satisfaction, the laughter was sharp, a shard of glass against the immense plush silence of the office. It burst from Veronica, a triumphant, ugly sound that echoed slightly against the vast panes of glass. She was draped across a low-slung Barcelona chair, a slash of crimson silk against the stark black leather, looking like a fresh and glorious wound. Outside, the city of Manhattan glittered, a silent, sprawling witness of 1 billion lights. To Marcus, it wasn't a city, it was a kingdom, and from this high floor, he was its sole monarch. The air in his office was cold, conditioned to a precise 68 degrees, and carried the rich, layered scents of peat-smoked scotch, old leather, and the faint, ozonic hum of powerful electronics. It was the smell of victory. Marcus swirled the 25-year-old amber liquid in his heavy crystal tumbler. The ice cubes' perfect hand-carved spheres clinked a slow, rhythmic beat against the thick glass, a sound like a funereal bell. He watched Veronica, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. She was a beautiful weapon, and he enjoyed watching her celebrate the damage she'd helped inflict. "Her face!" Veronica gasped, her laughter subsiding into breathless, vicious little pants when her pathetic little keycard went red. That flat, cheap little beep! Oh God, it was better than the opera, better than anything at the Met. Her heavy gold bracelets, thick as handcuffs, chimed as she gestured, mimicking the moment of the intern's electronic execution. The way her shoulders just slumped, all that fake confidence draining out of her right onto the marble floor. "Efficiency is the cornerstone of progress, my dear." Marcus's voice was a low, self-satisfied rumble deep in his chest. "Sentiment is a liability we can't afford." He moved from the window to his desk, a vast plain of polished obsidian that reflected the city lights like a dark, still lake. He ran his hand over the cool, seamless surface. He felt powerful, untouchable. The little intern, Sarah, was a bug he had swatted from his path, a minor annoyance, expertly and very publicly handled. The display was necessary. It was a message to anyone else who might consider being an inconvenience. "You didn't just handle it," Veronica purred, rising from the chair. The movement was liquid and practiced. Her red dress, the color of a freshly drawn arterial spray, flowed around her like liquid fire as she slunk towards him. "You annihilated her. The way you dropped her pathetic little report in the lobby, pages scattering everywhere like dead leaves, all those little charts and graphs." She shuddered with theatrical delight, pressing herself against his back, her arms wrapping around his chest. All that earnest, pointless work, all for nothing. He looked past her, his gaze unfocused, his mind replaying the scene in the crystalline, slow motion of memory. The cavernous lobby, the sea of anonymous faces, all pretending not to watch, the intern's initial shock, a flash of white in her wide eyes. But then her chin held high. That flicker of defiance, it was a spark that needed to be extinguished before it could ever catch. "She is a vessel for an inconvenience," he said. The words hung in the cold air, devoid of heat. A simple, sterile assessment, like a doctor diagnosing a tumor. Veronica's smile widened, a predatory gleam in her eyes. She moved around to face him, running a scarlet-nailed finger along the sharp lapel of his dark, bespoke suit. "An inconvenience we need to make disappear, permanently. The firing was just the appetizer, Marcus. It was a delicious, salty little amuse-bouche. Now show me the main course." A flicker of irritation, her pushing, her constant, insatiable need for more. He suppressed it. For now, she was an asset. He opened a slim, unmarked drawer on his desk. It slid open on silent, perfectly engineered runners. He retrieved a single heavy black file, its surface cool and smooth beneath his fingertips. He placed it between them on the obsidian desk. The gesture was deliberate, ceremonial. "Patience, Veronica," he chided softly. "Strategy requires precision, not just scorched earth." He opened a file. Inside were not corporate reports, but a meticulously curated collection of a life dismantled. Grainy surveillance photos of Sarah, walking into a free clinic in the outer boroughs, her shoulders hunched against the rain. A copy of a legal retainer with a ruthless, high-profile family law firm. A series of pre-written, notarized affidavits from Shell employees he'd had on the payroll for months, all attesting to her erratic behavior, emotional instability, and inappropriate workplace fantasies. First, we establish a pattern of unreliability. Today, accomplish that. Publicly. Irrevocably. Irrevocably? Now, she's unemployed, distraught, unstable. He paused, a showman building to his reveal. He enjoyed explaining the intricate machinations of his power. It was a form of monologue that reaffirmed his own genius. Should she make any claims, any desperate gold-digging attempts to attach her little problem to me, we are prepared. We paint her as a vindictive, delusional ex-intern with a history of fabrication. Her word against the senior manager of corporate strategy at Apex Innovations. Who do you think the board, the press, or any judge will believe? I'll believe it when I see a ring on this finger and my name on the partnership agreement, she shot back, her voice losing its purr, replaced by the hard, glittering edge of a transaction. You promised, Marcus. A new life. Us. That means getting rid of all the baggage, not just managing it. He looked at her, truly looked at her then. The hunger in her eyes. It was the same ravenous, bottomless hunger that drove him. He understood it. In a flash, he saw his father smelling of grease and cheap soap after a 16-hour day. The memory surfaced. My father worked 3 jobs. He died tired and poor. He believed in being a good man. Good men finish last. This was his one human moment, a fleeting glimpse of the engine behind the monster before it was locked away again in a cold, dark vault. You'll get what you want, he said, his voice softer, a promise that was also a threat. Veronica saw her opening, the brief crack in his armor. She took his hand, the one holding the cold, sweating glass, and placed it on her flat stomach over the thin, expensive silk of her dress. Her eyes, dark and unreadable, locked on his. The warmth of her skin was a stark contrast to the chill of the crystal. Good, she whispered, her voice dropping, laced with a new, potent secret. Because you're not just clearing away an old problem, Marcus. You're not just managing baggage. She pressed his hand tighter. You're making room for our future. He stilled. The ice in his glass fell silent. The entire world, the city, the hum of the air seemed to hold its breath. What are you saying? The question was quiet, almost a whisper. She isn't the only one. A slow, deliberate, triumphant smile bloomed on her face. I'm pregnant. Doubt was not a state Marcus Thorne inhabited. He processed information, calculated outcomes, and acted. Her claim fit the narrative he wanted with such breathtaking perfection, it was almost poetic. It was the solution. The failed, unstable intern with her inconvenient, low-class problem replaced by the stunning, ambitious partner with his legitimate, blue-blooded heir. This was not a complication, it was a coronation. A surge of pure, unadulterated triumph washed through him, hot and intoxicating. He had won. He had everything. The child with Sarah was a mistake, a loose thread in the tapestry. This, with Veronica, was destiny made manifest. His smile returned, wider and more genuine than any he had shown before. He let out a sharp, gratified laugh, the sound of a predator closing his jaws. He leaned in and kissed her, a hard, possessive kiss of ownership and acquisition. "Thorne heir!" he breathed against her lips. He pulled away, his eyes gleaming with a new, vicious energy. He strode to his desk with renewed purpose, picked up the sleek black handset of his private line, a phone that connected to only 3 numbers, and stabbed a single pre-programmed button. He turned to face the window, looking at his own reflection superimposed over the conquered city. His city. "Sinclair," he commanded into the receiver, his voice like cold steel. "Activate the Williams protocol. Full force, no half measures. And Sinclair, no witnesses." He hung up, the solid, definitive click of the phone echoing the finality of a closing tomb. He raised his glass, not to Veronica, but to the powerful, smiling figure staring back at him from the darkened glass, a god silhouetted against a universe of captured stars, a toast to the future. While Marcus toasted his dark victory, across the city, the meticulous gears of his Williams protocol had already begun to turn. For Sarah, the short journey home was not a return to sanctuary, but a descent into an even deeper nightmare. The sleek black car, a chauffeured Mercedes, glided to a halt before the familiar, ornate wrought iron gates of her Upper East Side brownstone. The polished chrome of the door handle felt cold against Sarah's fingertips, a contrast to the humid, late afternoon air. She stepped out onto the cobblestone path, the familiar scent of old brick and blooming jasmine, a comforting embrace. Her key card, once her access to Apex, now felt like a worthless sliver of plastic in her cream-colored coat pocket. The day's humiliation still clung to her, a suffocating shroud. She ascended the shallow steps, the worn limestone cool beneath her flats. The heavy mahogany front door, with its intricate brass knocker shaped like a lion's head, always offered a promise of sanctuary. She inserted her key, a silver heirloom passed down from her grandmother, into the lock. It turned with a crisp, reassuring click, or it should have. The lock resisted, a small, inexplicable resistance. She tried again, a ripple of unease starting in her stomach. The tumblers remained stubbornly unyielding. A cold, creeping sensation, like tendrils of ivy, began to climb her spine. She tried a third time, then a fourth, the key scraping uselessly against a mechanism that felt alien, changed. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked her skin. She stepped back, her hand instinctively going to her belly. The jasmine scent now seemed cloying, sickly sweet. The brass knocker felt menacing. Her sanctuary was a fortress, but one that now excluded her. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers clumsy, and dialed Marcus. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. It rang once, twice, then a click. "My dear Sarah." Marcus's voice, smooth as polished obsidian, oozed through the speaker. "Always so predictable." "What have you done?" Her voice, though low, trembled with raw disbelief. A pause, then the dry, brittle rustle of paper. "Just tying up loose ends, Sarah. Business, you understand?" "This is our home." The words were an accusation, a plea. "It was never our home, Sarah. It was my asset, an investment." His tone sharpened, a razor's edge, and now it's being resecured for my family, not yours. The line went dead. Her breath hitched, phone black, door impenetrable. A sob caught. She would not cry. Her chin went up. She turned, her cream coat swirling around her, and walked back down the path. Her car, that was hers, a small, independent act of control. She had left her cream-colored Mercedes parked on the street, its familiar lines a beacon of normalcy. She reached into her coat pocket for the keys. Not there. She patted her pockets, a frantic search. She remembered leaving them on the kitchen counter, certain she would be back in 1 hour. Her car was gone, a chasm. She stood disoriented. No home, no car. Cards declined. A bitter memory surfaced. A company's greatest asset is its people. Marcus's words. The late afternoon sun, a cruel, mocking spotlight. The city, usually a symphony of bustling life, now seemed to mock her with its indifference. She checked her wallet, her credit cards. She tried to recall her PIN, her mind a frantic, empty scramble. She tried one, declined. Another, declined. Even her debit card, declined. Apex Innovations Group, its name a mocking echo of success, occupied the top 5 floors of the glittering skyscraper, its glass facade a monument to ambition. Inside, on the 55th floor, the private conference room shimmered with a cold, metallic light. Marcus Thorne sat at the head of a vast, polished mahogany table, his dark suit a stark contrast to the pale, sterile hues of the room. Around him, 3 figures in bespoke suits, their faces grimly professional, sat with leather-bound portfolios open before them. These were not the company's in-house counsel, but a specialized team from a notoriously aggressive divorce firm. The scent of expensive coffee and new leather filled the air, thick with unspoken strategies and calculated maneuvers. Marcus held a pre-drafted document, its pages crisply official. "The restraining order is filed," he stated, his voice calm, devoid of any emotion. "Temporary custody secured. The assets are frozen." One of the lawyers, a man with silver hair and eyes like chipped ice, nodded. "The offshore accounts are impenetrable. The trust is ironclad. Her access to any joint resources has been terminated, effective immediately." "And the Williams Protocol?" Marcus asked, his gaze sweeping over the polished surface of the table. "Engaged," another lawyer confirmed. "All personal lines of credit revoked, property titles transferred, electronic access to all accounts severed. Any attempts to access them will be flagged and reported." He paused. "It's a clean sweep, Mr. Thorne. She has nothing." Marcus allowed himself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Excellent!" The sun dipped below the Manhattan skyline, painting the western sky in streaks of bruised purple and fiery orange. Sarah sat on a park bench in Central Park, the cool stones seeping through her cream coat. Her phone, clutched in her hand, was her last link to a life that had, in a single afternoon, disintegrated. She stared at the contact list, her mind a jumbled mess of names, none of them offering immediate solace. She scrolled past friends, colleagues, even distant relatives. Then, her finger hovered over a name, Uncle Robert. Robert Harrison, her mother's brother, a respected family lawyer, a pillar of support throughout her life. He was the one who helped her set up her trust fund, her private safety net, a small inheritance from her grandmother. He would know what to do. He would help. She called him. The ringing seemed to stretch an eternity. Finally, his voice, familiar and deep, answered, "Sarah, darling, how are you?" A wave of relief so profound it nearly buckled her. "Uncle Robert, I need your help. Marcus, he's locked me out of the house. My car's gone. My cards are all declined. I don't know what's happening." Her words tumbled out, breathless, desperate. A silence stretched on the line, longer than it should have been. A strange, almost imperceptible shift in his tone. "Sarah!" he began, his voice losing its warmth, becoming stiff, formal. "I'm afraid I can't discuss this with you." "What? What do you mean?" The cold dread that had subsided now surged back, colder, sharper. "I'm representing Marcus in this matter." The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. The air rushed from her lungs. You're representing him?" Her voice was a bare whisper. The world tilted. "But my trust, my grandmother's money, you set it up. You promised you'd always look out for me." "Legal obligations, Sarah. Professional ethics." His voice was a wall of ice. "I have a fiduciary duty to my client. I advise you to seek independent counsel." He paused, and she heard a rustle like paper. "Regarding the trust, access has been suspended pending the outcome of the divorce proceedings. A standard precaution." "Divorce proceedings?" The words were foreign, alien. They had been discussing it, yes, but not like this. Not with such cold, brutal finality. "The papers will be served shortly. I suggest you accept them. It would be less messy." His voice was devoid of any familial warmth. "Goodbye, Sarah." The line clicked dead. The phone, now a leaden weight, slipped from her numb fingers, hitting the stone bench with a dull thud. The divorce papers, a thick official envelope, arrived minutes later. A process server, a man in a dark, nondescript suit, materialized from the shadows of the park, holding out the envelope with a neutral, practiced expression. "Sarah Williams, you've been served." She took the envelope, her name, printed boldly, a stark accusation. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside, pages and pages of dense legal jargon. Her eyes scanned, searching for meaning, for a familiar clause, for anything that made sense. And then a single line, stark and brutal, leaped from the page. Plaintiff seeks sole custody of all minor children born of the marriage, citing defendant's instability and inability to provide a suitable environment. Hope, her baby. They wanted to take Hope. A raw scream trapped. She gripped her belly, primal instinct. No! A shadow fell over her. Marcus Thorne, impeccably dressed, stood before her, a dark silhouette against the fading light of the city. He had found her. He always found her. Veronica, a vibrant slash of red, stood a few paces behind him, a triumphant smirk on her painted lips. Her heavy gold earrings swayed, catching the last of the sun. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice a low, chilling purr. "Always the drama." He gestured to the papers in her hand. A small inconvenience, really, but necessary. "You want my baby?" Her voice was hoarse, ragged. He leaned in, his voice dropping, a conspiratorial whisper meant only for her. "I want a clean slate, Sarah. And that inconvenience? Well, it doesn't fit into my future. You're erratic, unstable. The court will see that. You're not fit to raise a child." His gaze flicked to her belly, a look of pure disdain. "Especially not my child." "She's not yours," Sarah whispered, her chin up. "She's mine, all mine." Marcus laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "You really believe that? Without a roof over your head? Without a penny to your name? How will you fight me? How will you feed that thing?" He leaned in closer, his words a venomous hiss. "You're a failure, Sarah. A pathetic, broken little woman who can't even hold on to a job, let alone a man. You are nothing." Nothing. The word echoed. The park felt vast, empty. She was nothing. The only sound was the distant hum of the city and the frantic beat of her own heart. She clutched the phone. The phone was a black, dead weight on the stone beside her. Then, a new sensation, a sharp, searing cramp low in her belly, a fist of pain clenching tight. It stole her breath. She gasped, her hand flying to the small, hard mound beneath her cream coat. Another spasm, fiercer this time, radiated through her. It was too soon, far too soon. Her vision blurred, the edges of the darkening park dissolving into a swimming vortex of purple and orange. The distant city hum became a roaring in her ears. Her chin went up. One last act of defiance. She would not collapse here. She would not be found like this. She pushed herself up, her legs trembling. A wave of dizziness crashed over her. She saw a pair of expensive running shoes stop in front of her, a woman's voice laced with tentative concern. "Are you all right?" Sarah tried to form words. The pain seized her again, a brutal contraction that made her cry out, a sound strangled in her throat. Her knees gave way. The world went white, a sharp, sterile smell, antiseptic and bleach. The scratch of stiff, over-laundered cotton sheets against her skin, the rhythmic, electronic beeping of a machine she could not see. Sarah's eyes fluttered open. The ceiling was a landscape of acoustic tiles, stained with faint watermarks. She was in a hospital gown, pale cream. A thin tube snaked from the back of her hand. Her belly, now a prominent, tight drum beneath a thin blanket, ached with a deep, rhythmic intensity. Hope was in trouble. A doctor, a kind-faced woman with tired eyes, stood over her. Her name tag read Dr. Anna Reed. "Sarah, you're at Lenox Hill. You collapsed in the park. You're 31 weeks pregnant and you're in preterm labor." The words were calm, clinical. They landed like hammer blows. The stress, the shock your system has undergone, it sent your body into crisis, Dr. Reed continued, her voice gentle. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. The baby's heart rate is decelerating with each contraction. We can't stop the labor, Sarah, and a natural delivery is too risky for both of you now. Sarah's hand trembled as she placed it on her stomach, a desperate protective gesture. What do you have to do? We need to perform an emergency cesarean section. We need to get her out, now. Dr. Reed's gaze softened. We need to get consent from the father. Is he here? Can you call him? The father, the architect of this entire nightmare. The name felt like ash in her mouth, but her baby's life was on the line. She had no choice. She nodded, a single jerky motion. The nurse handed her the hospital phone, its plastic cool and impersonal. Sarah's fingers, clumsy and shaking, punched in the familiar numbers. Marcus Thorne looked at the glowing screen of his phone. Private number. He knew who it was. He was at the grill, the clink of fine silverware and the low murmur of power brokering the ambient sound. Veronica sat across from him, a vision in a blood-red cocktail dress, a diamond necklace glittering at her throat. She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. He let the call go to voicemail. It rang again, insistent, annoying. With a sigh of performative exasperation for Veronica's benefit, he answered. What? Marcus, Sarah's voice was weak, punctuated by a sharp intake of breath. I'm in the hospital, Lenox Hill. Always the drama, Sarah. He swirled the burgundy in his glass, admiring its legs. This is a new low even for you. What is it this time? A sudden case of the vapors? You can't serve divorce papers on a ghost. It's the baby, she gasped, the sound of a machine beeping frantically in the background. She's in distress. They have to take her. An emergency C-section. The doctor needs your consent. Please, Marcus, they need you here. He fell silent. The baby. His plan had accounted for the child as a future legal problem, a financial liability, not as a present physical reality, not as a fragile life in danger. For a sliver of a second, he saw his father, hands scrubbed raw with industrial soap, exhaustion etched into his face like a roadmap of failure. The memory surfaced. My father worked 3 jobs. He died tired and poor. He believed in being a good man. Good men finish last. This child, this complication with Sarah, was a link to that world of weakness, a world of feeling. Veronica's child was the heir. This was just baggage. No, he said, his voice flat, cold, and final. This changes nothing. You're a liability, Sarah. You and your condition. Handle it yourself. Or don't. It's no longer my concern. Marcus, please. She's your daughter. My lawyer will be in touch regarding any medical bills. He hung up. He placed the phone face down on the white tablecloth. Veronica was watching him, her expression a careful mixture of concern and possessiveness. Trouble in paradise? He looked past her, out the plate glass window at the glittering city. His city. The intern is making a final pathetic plea for attention. He took a long, slow sip of his wine. The monster was back in its cage. It's been handled. The line went dead. The drone of the dial tone was the cruelest sound she had ever heard. He wasn't coming. He was leaving her, leaving them. Tears pricked her eyes. Hot, angry, useless tears. She would not cry. Her chin went up. I am her mother, she said to Dr. Reed, her voice shaking but firm. My consent is the only one you need. Dr. Reed nodded, a flicker of admiration in her tired eyes. "We need to move, now." As the nurses began to prep her, detaching wires, talking in low, urgent tones, Sarah's mind reeled. Alone! She was so alone. The feeling was a physical weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. And then a memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. Marcus, standing on a stage at an Apex town hall, beaming under the bright lights, his dark suit impeccable. He was charming the room, selling them a vision. The memory surfaced. "A company's greatest asset is its people," he had declared, his voice ringing with false sincerity. The memory was a dagger, twisting in the wound of his betrayal. The gurney was moving, a blur of ceiling lights and white walls. The air grew colder as they approached the operating room, a swoosh of automatic doors. And then a slash of red. Veronica Stone stood in the middle of the hallway, blocking their path. She was in a stunning, tight red dress, her arms crossed over her chest. The gold of her bracelets and earrings seemed to scream in the sterile quiet of the hospital corridor. She wasn't looking at Sarah, she was looking at Sarah's belly, a smirk of triumph on her lips. A nurse tried to steer the gurney around her. "Ma'am, you can't be here. This is a sterile area." Veronica's gaze finally lifted, meeting Sarah's. The hatred in them was pure and undiluted. "I just came to see it for myself," she said, her voice a low, vicious purr. "To make sure this little problem was finally being excised." She took a step closer, her expensive perfume, a heavy gardenia scent, warring with the smell of antiseptic. "Marcus sends his regrets. He's busy planning for a future that doesn't include this." The words were a calculated cruelty, designed to inflict maximum pain. They hit their mark. But as the nurses pushed the gurney past her, past the vindictive smile and the gaudy gold, a new feeling took root in Sarah. Not despair, not defeat. Rage, cold, clear, and clarifying. The operating room was a shock of cold metal and blue-green fabric. The lights above were blinding suns. A blue curtain was raised, separating her from the lower half of her body, a small, private sky. She heard the clink of instruments, the murmur of voices. She felt a pulling, a pressure. She focused on the beeping of the monitor, the frantic, tiny heartbeat of her daughter. "Fight," she thought. "You have to fight, Hope." The pressure intensified, the doctor's voice calm and steady. "All right, Sarah, you're going to feel a lot of pressure now. We're almost there." The world narrowed to that pressure, to the frantic thrum of her own heart, to the silent, desperate prayer she sent to the tiny life within her. And then, a sound. It was not the robust, angry cry of a full-term baby. It was a thin, reedy wail, fragile as spun glass. It was more of a gasp than a cry, a tiny, indignant protest against the cold, bright world. The sound pierced the sterile hum of the room. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. It was the sound of hope. Tears streamed down her temples, into her hair. The tension in her body finally snapped. She was a mother. The silence of the recovery room was a blessing. The sharpest pains had been blunted by medication, leaving a dull, throbbing ache. The city lights glowed softly through the wide window. A nurse entered, pushing a clear, wheeled incubator. Inside, swaddled in a soft white blanket, was a tiny, perfect form. A web of tiny, delicate wires monitored her every breath. "She's a fighter," the nurse whispered, positioning the incubator beside Sarah's bed. "Small but mighty." Sarah pushed herself up, wincing. She reached a trembling hand toward her daughter. Her skin was a beautiful, deep brown, her hair a wispy black fuzz. Her Her face was impossibly small, her features delicate and perfect. Sarah's finger brushed against the baby's tiny, clenched fist. The fist uncurled, miniature fingers wrapping around Sarah's own. A connection, a bond forged in fire and betrayal. The nurse carefully lifted the baby, wires and all, and placed the warm, light bundle in Sarah's arms. The weight was almost nothing, yet it was everything. She looked down at her daughter, her hope. In that tiny, fragile face, she saw not an end, but a beginning. She had lost everything she thought she wanted, and found the only thing she ever needed. She was alone, but not empty. Her fight had just begun. The soft, clinical glow of the monitor cast a gentle, rhythmic pulse across the room, painting the pristine white walls with an intermittent, ethereal blue. Each throb of light was accompanied by the faint, almost inaudible beep, 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 beep of Hope's tiny heart rate, a sound Sarah had quickly learned to interpret as the steady drumbeat of her own fragile hope. The air, filtered to an almost unnatural purity, circulated with a cool, whisper-quiet efficiency, carrying a faint yet distinct scent. It was primarily sterile linen, crisp and clean, but beneath it, a delicate, sweet whisper of baby powder, a scent that already felt inextricably linked to the miniature human currently occupying the majority of Sarah's world. Plush, dove-gray carpets, thick and luxurious, muted every sound, swallowing the soft rustle of her own movements, the gentle turning of a page in a forgotten magazine, even the distant, muted hum of the hospital's sophisticated machinery. This was a private suite, a sanctuary meticulously designed for quiet recovery, far removed from the bustling, often chaotic, sounds and sights of the general ward. On a small, movable bassinet beside her bed, Hope slept, a tiny bundle of warmth wrapped snugly in a pale yellow receiving blanket. Her breathing was a shallow, almost imperceptible rise and fall, a fragile rhythm that held Sarah captive. Sarah watched her, her gaze tracing the delicate curve of Hope's cheek, the barely there lashes, the perfect bow of her minuscule lips. A hand, still trembling slightly from exhaustion and lingering emotional turmoil, rested on the baby's minuscule chest, feeling the steady rhythmic beat of a new, incredibly fragile life. It was a beat that resonated deep within Sarah, a counterpoint to the insistent, dull throb of her own incision, a persistent ache that radiated from just beneath her navel. It was a constant, searing reminder of the trauma she had endured, a fiery line etched beneath the smooth, cream-colored gown the hospital provided. Every tiny shift, every deep breath sent a ripple of discomfort through her, a physical manifestation of the raw wound Marcus had left on her soul. She had stalled. Oh, how she had stalled. For hours she had stared at the stark, impersonal white page on the hospital-issued tablet, a digital list of contacts she had painstakingly compiled. Past friends, some offering platitudes, others quick to retreat. Past colleagues whose concern felt superficial, wrapped in professional distance. Past even distant family, their responses ranging from genuine sadness to thinly veiled judgment. Each name had been a hope, quickly dashed, a door closing softly. Now, only one remained, the one she had always known she would eventually have to make, the one she had dreaded with a cold, insistent fear that mirrored the ache in her belly. Her new reality, Marcus's devastation, pressed down, a suffocating despair. Yet, as she looked at Hope, a fierce primal instinct ignited. Her chin went up, a barely perceptible tilt of defiance. For Hope. With a deep, shaky breath that sent a fresh wave of discomfort through her incision, she reached for the sleek, off-white hospital phone. Its smooth, cool plastic felt foreign in her hand, yet grounding. Her fingers, still slightly weak from childbirth and days of emotional strain, navigated the familiar numbers with practiced precision, each press a small, deliberate act of courage. The tone of the dial echoed in the quiet room, a harsh, mechanical sound piercing the calm. The phone rang once, a sharp, almost aggressive sound. Twice. Each ring stretched into an eternity, an amplifier for her mounting anxiety. Then, a click. "Williams!" The voice was deep, resonant, a timbre that spoke of generations of authority and unyielding resolve. It betrayed no surprise, no hint of the hour or the circumstances, just a name, delivered like a pronouncement. An ocean of calm, utterly unperturbed by the storm raging within her. "Grandfather!" Her voice was a fragile whisper, a thread stretched taut and dangerously close to snapping. It was laced with exhaustion, fear, and a desperate plea she hadn't consciously intended to utter. A pause, a long, heavy breath on the other end, a sound that seemed to fill the vast silence between them, traveling across miles of wire and unspoken history. It wasn't a sigh of exasperation, but one of deep contemplation, perhaps even a quiet recognition of the weight of her call. "Sarah! How is she?" His question was direct, cutting through the emotional fog, focusing on the core issue. The day, the lack of preamble, the immediate concern for Hope was both a relief and a stark reminder of his singular focus. "She's small, so incredibly small." Sarah's voice caught, a sob threatening to break free. She swallowed hard, gripping the phone tighter, knuckles white. "But she's here. She's beautiful, grandfather, just perfect." She fought to keep her voice level, to project a strength she didn't feel. "Marcus, he took everything. My home, my car, my accounts, my lawyer. He wants to take Hope. My lawyer, he wants to take Hope." The words came out in a torrent then, a dam breaking, all the carefully controlled composure crumbling under the pressure. The details tumbled out, raw and painful, painting a picture of utter dispossession and calculated cruelty. "He has frozen all my assets, grandfather. My credit cards are declined. I have no access to anything. My legal representation, they just dropped me. Said it was above their pay grade. It's like he vanished my entire life." Her breath hitched. "He says he'll prove me unfit, that I'm unstable after the birth. He wants to take her away from me, grandfather. My baby, my Hope." The fear was palpable in her tone, a primal shriek echoing in the quiet room. The betrayal felt particularly cruel during this vulnerable postpartum period. "I know." Stillness, unsettling power, made aware. The words hung in the air, cold and precise, implying a vast network of information, an unseen hand that moved far above the common legal squabbles. He didn't ask how or when, he simply knew. The implication was clear. Marcus Thorne, for all his machinations, was not operating in a vacuum beyond the reach of the Williams family. "He called me a failure. He said I was nothing." Her voice cracked, a thin, desolate sound. The words Marcus had flung at her, meant to sting and destroy, had found their mark. She gripped the phone tighter, her fingers aching against the plastic. At the sound of her distress, Hope stirred, a tiny whimper escaping her lips, a brief flutter of movement in the bassinet beside her. It was a sound that both broke Sarah's heart and solidified her resolve. Hope needed her. Hope needed her to be strong. "He's wrong." Each word was a stone, precisely placed, weighty and unyielding. "You are not nothing. You are a Williams. A Williams never breaks. A Williams never yields." The resonance deepened, vibrating through the phone line, a tangible force. It wasn't just a statement, it was a decree, a recall to a heritage steeped in power, resilience, and an unyielding will. Rest, Sarah. Get strong. Focus on hope. Leave the rest to me. His command was absolute, leaving no room for argument or further explanation. The Williams name, she knew, carried a historical weight, a legacy of unshakable influence, and an almost mythic ability to overcome. But, Sarah began, a desperate need to understand, to participate, to not feel utterly helpless, welling up inside her. How could she simply leave it? What would he do? "There are some things even Marcus Thorne cannot touch," Grandfather interrupted, his voice cutting through her interjection with the finality of a gavel striking wood. "He will learn this, swiftly, and with consequences." The implied threat was immense, a promise of retribution so absolute it chilled her to the bone even as it offered a strange, grim comfort. The line went dead with a definitive click, the abrupt silence echoing in the now too quiet room. Sarah stared at the phone in her hand, its inert form feeling suddenly heavy, cold. The shock of his calm, his absolute unshakable certainty washed over her, replacing the frantic panic with a strange, dawning sense of awe. He knew. He had known, perhaps even before she had. A cold fury, slow and steady, began to burn in the pit of her stomach. It wasn't a wild, uncontrollable rage, but a quiet, determined heat, fueled by the sheer injustice of it all and by the unwavering conviction in her grandfather's voice. She looked at Hope, sleeping peacefully, her tiny face serene, utterly unaware of the battle being waged over her future. They were not alone. She had not, after all, lost everything. A distant sound pierced the quiet, barely perceptible at first, then growing steadily louder. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing faintly in the carpeted hallway outside her private suite. They weren't the hurried, purposeful strides of a nurse, nor the rushed shuffle of a family member. These were heavier, measured, betraying a sense of calm authority. Click, thud, click, thud, click, thud. Each sound drew closer, creating a subtle crescendo of anticipation in the hushed corridor. A soft click, distinctly metallic. The door handle turned, slowly, precisely. The slight creak of the hinges, a barely audible sigh of wood, preceded the subtle shift of light as the door began to swing open. The door swung inward with a silent, hydraulic sigh, revealing a man who seemed to command the very air in the hallway behind him. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that hung on his frame with the ease of long familiarity. Silver streaked the temples of his close-cropped hair, catching and fracturing the muted blue light that pulsed from the vital signs monitor beside Sarah's bed. His face, a landscape of quiet authority and sharp intelligence, was unlined by stress, but marked by the deep certainty of a man who had shaped worlds with a word. He was Arthur Williams. He did not walk into the room, he occupied it. Behind him, two figures, a man and a woman, moved with a quiet, synchronized efficiency that spoke of years of practice. They were dressed in similarly sharp, dark business attire, their faces impassive, their movements precise as surgical instruments. They were extensions of his will. The woman carried a slim, state-of-the-art tablet, its screen already glowing with dense columns of data. The man carried a polished leather briefcase that clicked softly with each step. The faint, expensive scent of sandalwood and old leather momentarily displaced the sterile, antiseptic hospital air, a brief, olfactory conquest. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, a sharp, painful hitch. It was him! Arthur's eyes, a deep, penetrating brown, found Sarah's. They held no pity, only a profound, bottomless well of affection and resolve that seemed to pour strength directly into her. He crossed the plush, sound-dampening carpet in 3 long, silent strides. He did not rush, he simply arrived. He leaned down, his movements fluid and deliberate, and pressed his lips to her forehead. The touch was brief, warm, a transfer of certainty that quieted the frantic tremor in her hands. "I'm here now," he said, his voice the low, resonant timbre she had just heard on the phone, a sound that promised foundations would shake. "It's all right." His gaze shifted to the bassinet. He looked down at Hope, at the impossibly small form swaddled in a soft yellow blanket, her chest rising and falling in a fragile rhythm. A flicker of something soft and intensely vulnerable crossed his features, there and gone in a heartbeat. He reached out a single, long finger, a finger that had signed deals worth nations, and gently stroked the baby's cheek, his touch impossibly tender against her translucent skin. Hope stirred, a tiny mewling sound escaping her lips, but did not wake. "She is a Williams," he stated, not as a point of pride, but as a simple, unassailable fact. It was a shield, a declaration, and a promise. He then straightened up, his focus absolute, the brief softness gone, replaced by crystalline purpose. He turned to his team. "Begin." The command was soft, barely a murmur. The response was immediate. The room waited with bated breath. The woman with the tablet was already swiping, her fingers a blur across the glass screen. The man snapped open his briefcase with a muted, satisfying click and produced a small, encrypted satellite phone. The quiet, rhythmic beeping of Hope's heart monitor was now joined by the staccato rhythm of frantic tapping on glass and a hushed, one-sided conversation laced with clipped, incomprehensible jargon. "We're in," the woman said, her voice a low monotone. "Mr. Thorne's personal brokerage accounts are now locked. A flag has been placed with the SEC's Enforcement Division. They have the preliminary file." The man on the phone spoke, his voice as calm as a frozen lake. "Confirmation received. Morgan Stanley has frozen all of Mr. Thorne's personal and corporate credit lines, pending an immediate internal fraud and ethics review. His access is terminated." The woman tapped another icon. "His access to the Apex corporate servers has been revoked. All company-issued devices are being remotely wiped. His keycard access to headquarters was deactivated 60 seconds ago. Security is en route to his penthouse," the man added. "They will secure all personal electronics and hard documents under the Custodial Preservation Clause." Sarah watched, her hand resting on the tender, aching line of her incision beneath the thin cream hospital gown. Each quiet report was a brick being methodically removed from the prison Marcus had built around her. The air crackled with a chilling, silent efficiency. This was not anger, it was eradication, a cold, controlled storm. The door flew open again, so violently it slammed back against its rubber stopper. The jarring thwack was a violation in the calm, focused room. Marcus Thorne stood there, a wide, predatory grin stretching his lips over unnaturally white teeth. His dark suit was immaculate, his confidence a tangible, suffocating force that seemed to suck the air from the room. He surveyed the scene, his eyes gliding over the two professionals with dismissive amusement, lingering on Arthur and finally settling on Sarah with a look of triumphant contempt. He let out a short, barking laugh. "Well, well, you've been busy," he gloated, striding into the room as if he owned it, his expensive cologne, a sharp, aggressive scent that clashed with the sandalwood. He completely failed to register the identity of the older man who now sat in a visitor's chair, observing him with the unnerving stillness of a patient predator. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" "Her long-lost uncle with a 2-bit law degree?" he continued, his voice swelling, filling every corner of the room. "You have nothing. No money, no standing, no credibility. In 48 hours, a judge will declare you an unstable, unfit mother, and I will be granted sole custody of my heir." He gestured dismissively toward the bassinet, not even gracing it with a glance. He paced before her bed like a caged animal, his voice swelling, filling every corner of the room. "You tried to ruin me, you and your pathetic little secret. Did you really think you could outmaneuver me? But I am always one step ahead. I control the board, I control the narrative, I control everything. This company, this city, it bends to my will. A company's greatest asset isn't its people." He sneered, twisting the memory of his own words into a weapon against her. "It's power! And you, my dear, have absolutely none." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, cruel whisper that made her skin crawl. "It's over. It has been since you walked out. Sign the papers. Give me the child. Disappear. It's your only way out. This little stunt," he waved a hand at Arthur and his team, "this is just a pathetic final gasp." The room held its collective breath, anticipating the next move. The woman with the tablet looked up, her expression unchanging, her gaze fixed on a point just past Marcus's shoulder. "Mr. Williams, the motion has been filed with the family court. It cites perjury and attempted custodial kidnapping based on Mr. Thorne's documented threats." The man on the phone spoke, his voice as calm as a frozen lake. "The board chairman has invoked Article 7 of the corporate bylaws. An emergency vote is scheduled for 8 a.m. The only item on the agenda is the immediate termination and criminal referral of Senior Manager Marcus Thorne for gross malfeasance." Marcus froze mid-stride. He stared at the two assistants, his smile faltering, a flicker of confusion clouding his eyes. He turned to Arthur, finally seeing him, truly seeing him as more than just a piece of scenery. Arthur Williams remained seated. He did not move a muscle. The only thing that moved was his gaze, which pinned Marcus in place. He simply watched Marcus with a look of profound disappointment, as one might watch a promising experiment go catastrophically wrong. "Mr. Thorne!" The name hung in the air, a quiet command that cut through the electronic hums and beeps. "Apex Innovations Group has been the primary holding of my family for 50 years, Arthur said, his voice level, calm, and utterly devastating. Each word was a nail driven into the coffin of Marcus's world. "The company you believe you run, the board you believe you control, it is mine." Marcus stared, his mouth slightly agape as his mind scrambled to catch up. The name! Williams! It clicked into place with the sickening certainty of a dislocated joint snapping back. The Williams Tower, downtown, the Williams Foundation for Medical Research. The almost mythical founder and chairman of the board, a recluse who never appeared in public, who was only a name on the highest level letterhead. Arthur let the silence stretch, a cold, heavy blanket that smothered all of Marcus's bluster. He allowed the truth to metastasize in Marcus's mind. Then he delivered the final, fatal blow, his voice dropping to an almost gentle register. "And you have been terrorizing my granddaughter." He nodded slightly toward Sarah. "Wait!" The blood drained from Marcus's face, leaving it a waxy, sallow mask. His bravado, his entire sense of self, shattered like cheap glass. His gaze snapped from Arthur to Sarah, who met his look with her chin held high, her hand no longer on her belly but resting protectively on the edge of her daughter's bassinet. He saw it then, the resemblance. The same determined set of her jaw, the same unyielding light in her eyes that now stared back at him from the old man's face. It had been there all along. His world tilted on its axis. The floor seemed to drop away. He was not the predator, he was the prey. He had not been fighting a discarded intern, he had been waging war against a dynasty. The man with the briefcase stepped forward, his polished shoes making no sound on the carpet. He held out Marcus's own phone. The screen was lit up, vibrating with an incoming call. The caller ID read, "The private bank." "I believe this is for you," the man said, his voice devoid of all emotion. Marcus looked at the phone as if it were a snake, its glowing screen a hypnotic eye promising a venomous bite. He looked at Sarah, at the sleeping baby, at the old man in the chair who held his entire existence in the palm of his hand. He was still standing, but he was in free fall, the ground beneath him having disappeared entirely. Later that same morning, as the city began its frantic ascent towards a new workday, the reverberations of Arthur Williams's intervention shook Apex Innovations to its very foundations. The corporate world held its breath, awaiting the inevitable reckoning. The air in the Apex Innovations Group boardroom was a weapon. Chilled to a precise 68 degrees, it was designed to keep the mind sharp and the body uncomfortable. It smelled of ionized air from the purifiers, the old money scent of expensive leather, and the faint, bitter tang of industrial window cleaner used on the vast panes of glass that offered a silent, panoramic judgment over Manhattan. The silence was a physical presence, a thick blanket woven from anticipation and dread, broken only by the whisper of the climate control system and the almost imperceptible rustle of fine wool and silk as board members shifted in their seats. The long, obsidian black conference table reflected the recessed lighting in distorted, fractured lines, a cold, hard surface for a cold, hard morning. Everyone from that day was here, the same audience, a gallery of the powerful and the ambitious, the silver-haired lion who ran finance, the shrewd former litigator who now headed their legal department, the tech prodigy who'd made his first billion before he was 30, now sat in judgment. Marcus Thorne sat alone, halfway down the table, a man marooned on an island of his own making. His custom-tailored dark suit, usually a canvas of power, seemed to hang on him now, the sharp tailoring unable to conceal the slight, definite slump of his shoulders. The air felt thin in his lungs. He stared at the polished black surface before him, at his own reflection, a pale, hollowed-out version of the man who had, not so long ago, commanded this very space. His usual props of power, the sleek tablet, the ever-buzzing phone, were absent, leaving his hands to lie naked and useless on the table. He looked up only once, his gaze sweeping the room with a desperate, darting hunger, trying to find an ally, a flicker of support. He found none, only cold curiosity and a sea of averted eyes. Veronica Stone was a slash of crimson at the far end of the room, a defiant poppy in a field of granite. Her red dress was immaculate, a calculated armor of confidence, but her jewelry, a heavy gold chain necklace and a cluster of clattering bangles, is an unconscious admission of panic. It was a discordant symphony of nerves. She tapped a perfectly manicured, blood-red nail on her phone screen, the frantic, repetitive motion betraying the serene mask she wore. Her leg bounced a frantic, silent rhythm beneath the table. Every soft clink of her bracelets as she shifted was a note in her escalating panic. Then Sarah entered. The soft click of the door latch and the whisper of the hydraulic closer were the only sounds, yet the room's subtle acoustics shifted as all heads turned. She wore a simple, elegant cream-colored dress, the fabric soft and flowing, not a statement of wealth, but of quiet confidence. Her chin was up, her steps were measured, unhurried, each one a reclamation of her dignity. She did not look at Marcus. She did not look at Veronica. Her focus was a straight, unwavering line to the head of the table where her grandfather sat. Arthur Williams was a study in stillness, a statue carved from granite and quiet authority. He did not preside over the meeting. He was its center of gravity, pulling everything into his orbit. Beside him, an empty chair waited for Sarah. It was a throne she had never asked for but had now earned. As she walked, she felt a faint, familiar ache along her incision line, a phantom echo of the trauma that had brought them all here. The sensation was a grounding reminder, a secret map of her journey back from the brink. It was a reminder of hope, sleeping safely at home, and the fierce, unyielding purpose that now fueled every beat of her heart. She took her seat, the soft leather sighing beneath her. Arthur gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to a severe-looking woman on the board, Maria Flores. Her expression was that of a jurist, her eyes missing nothing. "This emergency session is called to order." Maria's voice was crisp, cutting through the tension like a shard of ice. "The agenda is singular, a review of the conduct of Senior Manager Marcus Thorne and its implications for this company." She turned her gaze toward the back of the room where a lone figure stood by the audio-visual console. "Mr. Chen, if you would." David Chen, the junior analyst, looked up from his console. He wore the same inexpensive suit as before, but today he stood taller, his shoulders squared. This was his moment of vindication, too. He gave a single, sharp nod. He did not speak. He pressed a button. There was a barely audible click, a faint hiss from the high-end speakers embedded in the walls, and then the sound filled the room. It was horrifyingly familiar. It was Marcus's voice, amplified, echoing with the same public arrogance from that first day. The room grew silent, the air thick with anticipation. Tardiness is a symptom of disrespect, of a lack of commitment. The disembodied voice was sharp, cruel, preserved in perfect, damning clarity. Sarah felt a dozen pairs of eyes land on her, but her expression remained serene, her hands folded calmly in her lap. She was not the target anymore, she was the witness. A palpable tension filled the space. "Your internship is terminated, effective immediately. Pack your things, security will escort you out." The audio captured the gasps, the shocked silence, the sound of a cardboard box of personal items being pushed dismissively across a desk. It captured everything. When the recording ended, the silence it left behind was heavier, more damning than the noise itself. Marcus flinched as if struck. His own words, weaponized, his own arrogance, played back as his epitaph. The public humiliation of a junior employee, who we now know was in the early stages of a high-risk pregnancy, is cause enough for termination, Maria stated, her voice like frozen steel. But it is merely the prologue. The massive screen behind Arthur lit up, bathing the room in a cold blue light. It was not a presentation. It was a spiderweb of deceit, numbers, flowcharts of transactions, highlighted transfers between offshore accounts. Collective intake of breath rippled through the boardroom. "We have evidence of financial malfeasance," another board member, a stoic man named Elias Vance, announced, his voice a low rumble. Mr. Thorne leveraged confidential company data from the Titan project to execute personal trades, netting an unauthorized gain of $14.7 million. The numbers glowed on the screen, a digital confession. The dates of the trades aligned perfectly with key project milestones, a clear and undeniable pattern of insider trading. He then systematically siphoned funds from departmental budgets into a shell corporation, Maria continued, her finger tracing a glowing red line on her tablet that mirrored the action on the giant screen. A corporation whose sole director, the screen zoomed in on a name, the letters stark and black. Veronica Stone. Veronica's head snapped up. The clatter of her bracelet stopped. "That's a lie!" Her voice was shrill, cracking the funereal atmosphere. "I knew nothing about that. Marcus, tell them!" Marcus, seeing a glimmer of an escape hatch, a potential scapegoat, finally spoke. His voice was a low growl. "She was my partner in all things. She knew exactly what happening. She picked the name for the shell company herself. She pushed me to do it, said we needed the capital for our future." "Our future!" Veronica shrieked, jumping to her feet. The sound of her chair scraping back was a violent shriek against the polished floor. "Our future was your obsession. You were the one who was desperate, panicked that Sarah's family might have more money than you. You were the one who needed to secure your position." "Secure my position?" Marcus laughed, a broken, ugly sound devoid of humor. "I was the position. You were the one so terrified of being left behind that you were faking a pregnancy to trap me." The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. It was a truth so vile it silenced even this jaded room. Veronica's face went white beneath her perfectly applied makeup. "How? How dare you?" Arthur Williams made a small, precise gesture with his hand. On the screen, the financial data vanished. It was replaced by a series of text messages, magnified for all to see, each character a tombstone on a shared grave. The room collectively gasped at the screen. "Veronica, the morning sickness act is getting exhausting. Can't wait till we can drop this. The sympathy from the board is worth it for now, though." "Marcus, just hold on. Once the merger is complete and I'm named Chief Operating Officer, it won't matter. We'll say you had a misfortune. It has to look convincing." "Veronica, fine, but this fake belly is getting itchy, and you owe me another bracelet, the Cartier one this time." The evidence was absolute. It was self-inflicted. Veronica stared at the screen, at her own callous words magnified for the world to see, and sank back into her chair with a shuddering gasp. Her downfall authored by her own thumbs. A distinguished silver-haired man near the end of the table slowly stood up, his knuckles white where he gripped the table's edge. He was Sterling Dubois, an old money real estate magnate and Veronica's uncle. His face was a mask of cold fury and deep, profound shame. "Veronica," he said, his voice trembling with rage, "you have not only disgraced yourself, you have made a mockery of our family name. You are no longer welcome in my home. You are no longer my blood." He took a ragged breath and turned his gaze to Arthur. "My apologies to this board, and to you, Ms. Williams." He sat down, his judgment delivered with the finality of a guillotine. Veronica didn't move. She just stared blankly at the screen, a scarlet statue of ruin. The silence returned, deeper this time. Elias Vance, the board member who had spoken earlier, picked up a heavy, leather-bound book from the table. It was the company's original charter, its pages gilt-edged and heavy with history. He opened it to a bookmarked page, his expression somber. He looked directly at Marcus. "From our founder's mission statement, page 1, Elias said, his voice resonating with a gravity that felt ancient. He read the words aloud, each one a stone cast into the quiet pool of the room. "A company's greatest asset is its people." He closed the book. The soft, definitive thud of leather on wood was the only sound, like a judge's gavel, a final verdict. In that profound silence, the artifice around Marcus finally crumbled. The mask of the predator, the titan, the victor dissolved, revealing something small, pathetic, and lost. He slumped in his chair, the last of his fight draining out of him. He looked at his hands, lying limp and alien on the cold, reflective table. "My father said to take what you want." His voice was a murmur barely audible, a confession whispered to himself. "It's the only thing he ever taught me. He never said what to do after, or how to hold it. I just wanted to win." He finally looked at Sarah, a flicker of genuine, pathetic confusion in his eyes. "I never thought she would be one of them." Arthur Williams let the confession hang in the air for a long moment before he spoke, allowing its full weight to settle. His voice, when it came, was not angry. It was the sound of a conclusion being reached, of a final page being turned. A hushed anticipation filled the air. "A vote is required. All in favor of the immediate termination of Marcus Thorne and for his criminal referral to the district attorney's office for fraud and corporate malfeasance." A forest of hands shot into the air, instantly, without a single moment of hesitation. "The motion carries," Arthur stated, the words flat and final. Two security guards, dressed in sharp black suits, entered the room as if summoned by the vote itself. They were large, impassive men who walked with a quiet purpose. They did not touch Marcus. They simply stood on either side of his chair, their presence an implacable fact. He stared at them, then back at the board, at the ruins of his life lay bare. Slowly, mechanically, he stood up. He walked between them, a ghost leaving his own haunting, his footsteps echoing softly before being swallowed by the long corridor. The room watched him go. Sarah took a slow, deep breath, the filtered air tasting of victory. Her chin was still high. Her hand rested on her stomach, a gesture of quiet protection, a silent vow to the little girl who would never have to know this fight. Her gaze swept over the faces in the room, the junior executives and assistants lining the walls, the ones who had witnessed her humiliation. They were all looking at her, their expressions a mixture of awe, relief, and newfound respect. Her eyes met those of a young woman near the door, a junior designer named Mia, who had offered her a tissue on that terrible first day. In the silence that followed Marcus's departure, a new sound emerged. Nia stood. It was not a grand gesture, but a quiet act of solidarity, a single ripple that promised a coming tide. The long, white corridor of the courthouse echoed with the hollow clap of Marcus Thorne's polished shoes. The sound, amplified by the sparse, unforgiving acoustics, felt like a judgment in itself. The temperature was a sterile, unforgiving 72 degrees, a chill that seemed to seep into the very bones despite his fine wool suit, now feeling far too heavy. The air hung thick with the faint metallic scent of old filings and the bitter, almost palpable tang of anxiety that clung to every surface, a silent testament to countless ruined lives. He walked between two impassive men in dark, precisely tailored suits, their starched white collars and perfectly knotted ties, a stark contrast to his own loosening composure. Their presence was a suffocating weight, a silent, immovable force. Their polished dress shoes, identical to his own, made no sound on the pristine floor. Each measured step took him further from the glittering, impossible towers of Manhattan, further from the life he had built, brick by stolen brick, high above the city's indifferent pulse. His dark suit, once a symbol of his dominion, custom-made and impeccably fitted, now hung like a shroud, its expensive fabric a mere shell around his diminishing form. He scanned the faces that lined the hallway, a desperate, almost primal urge for recognition, a flicker of human sympathy in their eyes. He found only the cold, unblinking stares of strangers, their curiosity thinly veiled, and the occasional fleeting gaze of thinly veiled triumph that pricked at his rapidly fraying dignity. One of the men beside him, a burly figure with eyes like chips of granite, grunted, a low, guttural sound. "Keep moving, Mr. Thorne!" The words were clipped, devoid of inflection, a simple statement of absolute control. Marcus swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. He was led into a small, windowless room, its air stagnant, smelling strongly of stale coffee and the cloying sweetness of desperation. The fluorescent lights hummed a low, incessant drone overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the drab, institutional gray walls, which seemed to absorb all light and hope. On a scarred wooden table, its surface scored with countless faint rings from forgotten coffee cups and the faint indentations of hasty writing, sat a simple beige landline phone and a stack of crisp, white legal documents. The papers, pristine and unforgiving, felt cold and alien to the touch. His sprawling, opulent world had shrunk to this claustrophobic box. The heavy steel door clicked shut behind him, the sound final, absolute, the metallic thud echoing in the oppressive silence. He was alone, utterly and irrevocably. The news broke like a dam, a torrent of digital outrage and speculative prose. The financial press, usually so enamored with his sharp pronouncements and aggressive strategies, now dissected his fall with a ruthless precision that felt almost surgical. Apex insider, trading scandal, Thorne's empire crumbles, granddaughter of chairman exposes corporate fraud. The bold headline screamed across every financial news outlet, each word a hammer blow to the edifice of his meticulously crafted reputation. That reputation, painstakingly built over decades of strategic maneuvers and calculated risks, evaporated in a maelstrom of lurid headlines and online outrage. The company's stock, once a titan of the market, a seemingly unshakable pillar, dipped precipitously, then rebounded with startling, almost brutal speed once Arthur Williams's interim leadership was announced. It was a swift, decisive excision, a corporate amputation. The market exhaled, a collective sigh of relief. Sarah watched it all unfold from her sun-drenched private suite at home, the sprawling city skyline, usually a source of endless energy, now a muted backdrop to the quiet revolution unfolding within her. The air around her was warm, sweet with the heady, exotic scent of jasmine from a vase on her bedside table, its white blossoms a delicate contrast to the gravity of the news. Hope slept soundly in a cream-colored bassinet beside her, a soft, contented sigh escaping her tiny, perfect lips, a sound of pure innocence that grounded Sarah in the swirling chaos. Sarah's hands, no longer trembling with the anxiety of her past, traced the delicate curve of Hope's cheek, feeling the baby-soft skin, a gesture of profound tenderness and fierce protection. She wore a flowing white silk robe, its cool, smooth fabric, a gentle caress against her skin, a tangible symbol of the peace she had found. Her chin was up, her gaze steady and unwavering as she absorbed the relentless stream of digital news, each headline of vindication. David Chen's detailed reports, once hidden and meticulously archived, were now public record, undeniable, irrefutable evidence of Marcus's systemic deceit. The legal proceedings moved with a speed that mirrored the market's urgency, fueled by Arthur Williams's quiet, relentless force, his unwavering commitment to justice. Days bled into weeks, the passage of time marked not by the calendar, but by the relentless march of legal proceedings. The public's insatiable appetite for scandal eventually moved on, drawn to newer, fresher narratives of corporate malfeasance, leaving only the grim, grinding machinery of justice to complete its work. Marcus sat in court, a ghost of his former self, his once sharp posture now slumped, his dark suit rumpled and stained, a shadow of its former elegance. His eyes, once alive with ambition, were now haunted, hollow, staring blankly ahead. He offered no defense, no counter-arguments, only a defeated, profound silence, the stillness of a man utterly broken. The evidence presented against him was irrefutable, a mountain of indisputable facts. The testimonies were damning, each word a nail in his coffin. Veronica Stone, a stark, striking figure in a blood-red dress that seemed to pulsate with suppressed energy, testified against him with a venom that shocked even the seasoned prosecutors. Her loud, ornate jewelry, usually a defiant jingle of opulence, now clinked with the frantic, almost desperate rhythm of her self-preservation, a brittle sound in the hushed courtroom. She laid bare their entire scheme, painting herself not as a willing participant, but as a manipulated accomplice, a fragile victim of his charm and ruthless ambition, her voice wavering with a carefully constructed vulnerability. "He promised me the world," she stated, her gaze sweeping across the jury, "but all he gave me was a gilded cage, trapped in his web of lies and deceit. I was merely a pawn in his elaborate, corrupt game." Marcus looked at her from the defense table, his eyes dead, devoid of all emotion. His mistress, his accomplice, his accuser. He had lost everything: his position, his immense fortune, his freedom. The bitter taste of betrayal filled his mouth, a grim companion to his despair. The verdict was swift, delivered with a cold, formal brevity that belied its immense weight. Guilty. The word hung in the air, heavy and inescapable. The clink of handcuffs, soft yet sharp, resonated through the hushed courtroom, a sound of absolute, irreversible surrender. As he was led away, Marcus passed a lone woman in the gallery. She was elegant, dressed in a muted gray suit, its understated fabric speaking volumes of a quiet strength. Her face was a mask of dignified sorrow, her composure unyielding. Martha Thorne, his wife of 30 years. She had borne his children, endured his casual infidelities, stood by his side through every dizzying career ascent, every public triumph. Now, her eyes, once filled with a quiet, enduring devotion, held only a profound, chilling emptiness that Marcus had never seen before. It was a void that swallowed all their shared history. He paused, a desperate, unspoken plea forming on his lips, a last, futile attempt to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. She met his gaze, her voice a whisper, cutting through the silence of the room like a scalpel, precise and utterly devastating. "You built a tomb, Marcus. We were all trapped." He was gone, led to a side door that swallowed him whole, leaving only the lingering echo of her words. "Oh!" With Marcus Thorne's ignominious exit, a shadow lifted from Apex Innovations. Weeks turned into months, and the relentless machinery of justice continued its work. But within the company walls, a different, more profound change was taking root. Out of the ashes of betrayal and corporate malfeasance, a new vision began to emerge, guided by the very woman once cast aside. Life at Apex Innovations Group began its quiet, profound transformation. Arthur Williams, the reclusive chairman who had once operated entirely in the shadows, stepped back, resuming his role as the unseen architect, but not before implementing a sweeping, comprehensive overhaul of the company's foundational structure and values. Sarah, after a brief, much-needed maternity leave, returned not as an intern, but as the Director of Corporate Ethics and Social Responsibility. Her office, now a spacious corner suite overlooking the glistening Hudson River, was bathed in natural light, the air clean and crisp, infused with the subtle scent of possibility. Her desk, crafted from reclaimed dark wood, felt solid, grounded, a tangible representation of the new ethical framework she was building. She surrounded herself with a team of bright, ambitious young professionals, their faces eager, their ideas fresh, their energy palpable. They moved with purpose, their voices hushed but confident, the rustle of their new reports, a soft counterpoint to the city sounds outside. Sarah knew that establishing a robust ethical culture was not just about compliance, but about fostering transparency and integrity at every level. One afternoon, Arthur Williams sat opposite her, a warm cup of herbal tea steaming gently between them. The delicate scent of chamomile mingled subtly with the faint aroma of fresh-cut paper from the reports stacked neatly on her desk, a blend of calm and industry. He surveyed her, a gentle smile touching his lips, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You've done well, Sarah, truly well. The culture is changing. It's palpable." She nodded, a soft but unyielding determination in her eyes. "It takes time, Arthur, so much time. But people are starting to believe in it again. They're speaking up, asking questions, feeling safe enough to challenge the old ways." She paused, a thoughtful expression on her face, tracing the rim of her own mug. "We're making sure that every employee, from the newest intern still finding their way to the most senior executive, understands their value beyond their output. It's about more than just numbers on a spreadsheet now." He leaned forward, his gaze unwavering, the warmth of his teacup radiating into his hands. "Because?" he prompted softly, encouraging her to articulate the core of her philosophy. Sarah met his eyes, a quiet power radiating from her, a calm conviction. Because a company's greatest asset is its people. He smiled, a genuine, warm expression that seemed to erase years from his face, making him look remarkably younger. "Indeed," he affirmed, a knowing quality in his voice. "And it's a lesson that often gets tragically lost in the relentless, singular pursuit of profit." They spoke further of the initiatives, of the initial resistance and the gradual shift, the way small changes accumulated into significant transformation. The company's quarterly town halls, once stiff, formal affairs dominated by bland corporate speak, now fostered open, vibrant dialogue. Employees, once hesitant, shared stories, innovative ideas, and even their genuine concerns, knowing their voices were not just heard, but valued. A new mentorship program, spearheaded personally by Sarah, paired seasoned executives with junior staff, creating a dynamic, interwoven network of support, shared knowledge, and mutual respect. The break room on the 30th floor, once a stark utilitarian space with harsh lighting and vending machines, was transformed into a vibrant community hub. It was now filled with comfortable, ergonomic seating, an array of living plants that purified the air and brought a touch of nature indoors, and the rich, inviting aroma of artisanal coffee, freshly brewed throughout the day. The air hummed with low, engaging conversation and the soft, intermittent clink of ceramic mugs, a symphony of connection. It was a space meticulously designed, not just for sustenance, but for connection, for collaboration, for people. Months passed in a blur of meaningful work and profound personal joy. Hope grew, a vibrant, curious baby with her mother's strong will shining in her bright eyes and, to Sarah's amusement, her grandfather's keen intelligence already evident in her focused gaze. Sarah cherished every moment, balancing her demanding new role with the exquisite, all-consuming joys of motherhood. She was fierce, gentle, and utterly unshakable, a testament to her journey. The scar along her incision line, a thin silver thread across her lower abdomen, had faded to a subtle whisper, a tangible memory of her trials, a quiet reminder of the immense strength she had found within herself. Each morning she looked at Hope, a tiny, warm hand often resting on her daughter's soft, round belly as she dressed her in cream-colored onesies, a ritual of love and continuity. One crisp autumn morning, just as the leaves outside began their fiery descent, a new initiative was launched with much fanfare. Apex Forward, a comprehensive mentorship and support program specifically designed for new parents within the company. It offered flexible hours, significantly enhanced parental leave benefits, and, most revolutionary of all, high-quality on-site childcare. The announcement was met with a thunderous standing ovation, a wave of heartfelt applause that swept through the packed auditorium. Sarah, radiant and poised, stood on the stage, the morning sun streaming through the panoramic windows, illuminating her elegant white dress, making her almost glow. She looked out at the sea of faces in the auditorium, the same faces that had once watched her humiliation, her public shaming, now reflecting genuine respect and burgeoning hope. She saw David Chen, now a senior analyst, offering a quiet, proud smile from the front row, his journey intertwined with hers. She saw Maria Flores, the severe board member, giving a rare, almost imperceptible yet deeply approving nod. And then her eyes found Nia, the junior designer who had offered a tissue in Sarah's moment of despair, who had stood in quiet solidarity when others had turned away, was now a manager herself, a testament to the new apex. She stood near the back, her face beaming with an open, unvarnished joy. And in her arms, swaddled in a soft, cream-colored blanket, was her own newborn, a tiny sleeping girl, her chest rising and falling with soft, even breaths. Nia, a new mother, had found not just a career, but a thriving community, support and deep inspiration in Sarah's strength and leadership. She had seen the future that Sarah was meticulously building, a future where compassion was not perceived as a weakness, but recognized as the unshakable foundation of a truly successful enterprise, a future where dignity was non-negotiable. Nia shifted the baby slightly in her arms, a tender, loving gesture that spoke volumes. She took a step forward, then another, her gaze fixed on Sarah. She moved through the parting crowd, a silent promise, a living embodiment of the change. The memory surfaced. A company's greatest asset is its people. The future walked, one confident step at a time, into the light.